Hello, I'm Gene T. Chavez, Community Curator at the Kansas City Museum. I'm presently exhibiting Mexican-American fast-pitch softball leagues, connecting communities across state lines. This exhibit is very important to the greater Kansas City area, and indeed the Midwestern part of the United States. So I hope you enjoy the exhibit. Follow me and you'll have an opportunity to see the interpretive panels, the artifacts, the memorabilia, and all that was involved in this very important sport. Communal ball games in the Americas have had at least a 3,000-year history before the arrival of Europeans. The tradition of ball games that bring communities together continues in Mexican-American communities today. Professional baseball leagues in Mexico are in their 90th year of league play. During the period of the late 1800s through the 20th century, there was a steady migration of Mexicans to the United States. Immigrants from Mexico brought their love of baseball with them. Because of the work opportunities in labor-intensive occupations, many Mexican Americans settled in the Kansas City communities on both sides of the Kansas and Missouri state line. As the Mexican American population grew, so did the number of Mexican American teams. This case contains artifacts donated by the Sauceda family of Kansas City, Kansas, the Argentine district. Especially noteworthy in this case is the jersey worn by Vince Sauceda in the 1940s. He played for the Railways Ice Company. This case contains a uniform from the 1930s of the Azteca team. The Aztecas were one of the first Mexican-American baseball teams that developed in the greater Kansas City area. This case also contains artifacts including a uniform and a team jacket of the Argentine Eagles. The Eagles were formed as part of Post 213 in Argentine, Kansas. This is the charter and signatories of the American Legion Hall Post 213 in Argentine, Kansas. The post was formed in 1949 after a group of Mexican-American GIs were rejected by a local post of the American Legion. Even after World War II, many Mexican-Americans faced segregation and discrimination. The formation of Mexican-American teams and leagues grew out of that discrimination. But Mexican-Americans overcame the stigma of being Mexican by excelling in America's game. Softball was invented in Chicago on Thanksgiving Day in 1887 when a Harvard alumnus balled up a boxing glove and another hit it with a broomstick. The game evolved into a national pastime. While most of the Mexican-American teams before World War II played baseball, after the war, men's fast-pitch softball was sweeping the nation. Companies formed industrial leagues and recruited Mexican-American employees into their teams. Churches and community organizations also formed softball teams. As softball teams formed in Mexican-American communities, leagues began to proliferate. These leagues sponsored annual tournaments in which Mexican-American teams from other communities could compete. The summers were filled with practice during the weekday evenings and tournaments across the region on the weekends. The tournaments drew hundreds of spectators. As the teams traveled, they brought their own fans and family members with them. These uniforms and artifacts represent teams that played across the region in the Mexican-American leagues.
I rode with the Espinosa brothers in the valleys of San Luis. In the early part of the 19th century, the corrido saw its apex in the heroes of the border. In the early part of the 1920s, I rode with a man by the name Trevino.
This case contains uniforms that were worn in the 1970s. The green uniform represents the state line locos that developed and formed in the 1940s.
Ya con esta van 3 veces que si ha visto lo bonito. La primera fue en McAllen, en Bronzeville y San Benito. En esa cantina de
This display of team hats represents only a few of the many Mexican-American teams that played within the region. This case contains program booklets from tournaments across the region. These booklets illustrate how well organized the tournaments were. They contain team brackets as well as the sponsors of the localities where the tournaments took place, as well as histories of the teams and tournaments in that area. In this case, you will see jerseys from 2 teams that played within the region. You will also see a replica of a tournament dance ticket. Dances were common in the Mexican-American tournaments. It was a great time of camaraderie and fellowship among the various Mexican communities of the region. This case contains artifacts from the Garcia family. The Garcia family migrated from Mexico in the 1970s and quickly formed a family team. The Garcias are now in their 4th generation of players. Jaime Garcia Jr. went beyond the region when he played for the USA team in Auckland, New Zealand. This case represents those who have gone beyond the region. For example, Mike Torres, who grew up in Topeka, Kansas, where his family played with the Mexican-American Fast Pitch Leagues, signed with the New York Yankees in 1977 and pitched in the World Series against the LA Dodgers. Great pride in the skill of the former players was recognized by the development of halls of fame in many Mexican-American communities across the region. Many younger players are still competing for a space in their local Hall of Fame. This exhibit contains many trophies won by Mexican-American teams in tournaments across the nation.
The corrido told the story of the heroes of the border, of the people, of the legends who I am. Ya con esta me despido. Aquí a presencia de todos.
In 1988, the Argentine Eagles competed in the ASA Men's Class B Fast Pitch Tournament. They emerged from that tournament as the national champions. These framed jerseys represent players and teams that had success outside the region. This jersey represents the Kansas City Angels, who won the North American Fast Pitch Association Class A World Series in 2009. These are personal archives kept by former players and their families. They represent the interest and pride that these families have in the games that they played. Since the 1970s, the Mexican-American teams have integrated with players of all ethnic groups, but the sense of ethnic group identity and pride in the accomplishments of the founders of the Mexican-American leagues still prevails. There are still Mexican-American teams that compete across the region and often enter national tournaments. These teams carry on the tradition of their forefathers. We would like to thank all the organizations and individuals who contributed to this exhibition. Without their help and constant encouragement, this exhibit would not have taken place. I want to thank you for taking your time to visit the Kansas City Museum in this virtual tour. I hope that you enjoyed the tour as much as I, as community curator, enjoyed putting it on with the cooperation of many wonderful people. Thank you and goodbye.
Y por eso los grandes amores de muchos colores me gustan a mí. Y por eso los grandes amores de muchos colores me gustan a mí.